opportunity to ask some questions, but I do want to ask each of you as business owners, how do you think about this from, you know, if you were talking to another business owner, what would you advise them? Like, what would you prioritize when you're thinking of these sustainable principles? Like, what would you try to hit and do as a, you know, just when you're thinking about the community and interacting with consumers? What types of things are you incorporating there?
I try to know, and it's like my business is definitely different from yours in this way, but I like to know the people who are growing my ingredients. I like to know what they are. I like to go to their farms. I like to see where these things are coming from. But still, sometimes, you know, that's not possible. Like if I'm getting, you know, lemon peels from a restaurant, I haven't been to that lemon farm, but I might know the restaurant. And I think just relationships are how you know. And that's, you know, that's how we're going to get out of any mess. The more relationships you have, the more you're invested and the more you care. And it kind of does snowball from that. You know, when you build an actual community, even if you don't get along with everybody in your community, everyone in that community benefits, the better each person does if you're all actually in a community. And I think that that's a really important thing that we get back to building. And I know that that's a word that gets thrown around a lot, but I think it's an important word if you really think about it. You know, if everybody in this room, if we all saw each other every day and we all worked together, and we all worked together for 20 years, and we knew we were going to still keep seeing each other until we were all dead. If somebody needed help, even if only half the people in the room decided to help that person would probably be okay. If one person did really well at something, they would probably give back. They're going to keep that money in their community. So trying to build that community as small as you can to start, I think, is a really good way, personally and business-wise, to do that. Like really having good relationships with who you're making purchases from, whether that's, you know, textiles or tallow or your coffee or, you know, who you buy your house from. There's a lot of different aspects there.
You're evolving from the dating straight on to like the whole community, right? And like Utah have a whole commune, make sure everyone's vetted.
Cults always sound great at the beginning, right? But something goes off the rails, but like if you could just keep that beginning part of like...
I think for me, I would tell whether you're you already have established business owner or you're thinking about starting something, I would say go big. Like we have some significant challenges and they're going to need aggressive, inventive, playful, passionate solutions. I would say don't play small. And then when I say go big, I mean, be connected to the people in your community. Always think about centering care as you're talking to people. But beyond that, like I really think about this idea of how is what you're doing driving something that speaks to a problem that you know well. If each of us identify a pain point in our lives or a spot of darkness in our lives and our journeys, I'm not saying this isn't my story, but my mother was abused, or we experienced homelessness, or I saw my pet suffer, or I know someone who had cancer, or I know I was in a neighborhood where kids didn't have access to books. If we each chose something to anchor what we built in terms of a response, we could all move collectively towards more solution finding, more like sincere, authentic solution finding. So I would say, if you're going to start a business, we can no longer afford to only pursue profit. We can't afford that. We have to pursue profit. Profit is necessary, but it can't be the only thing. This new era, what I'm hoping of business, of entrepreneurs, they have a real sense of, I want to pursue profit, but I also have a sense of personal liability and responsibility that makes me say that my vision has a space for people on the planet.
Definitely. Does anyone from the audience currently have some questions? I'm going to ask these experts. Yes?
So I have one question. I really appreciate the way y'all were talking about relationships and building relationships with your local businesses to become a more ethical consumer. And one issue I struggle with trying to make ethical choices when buying things is I have to rely on marketing and the internet to do my own research and try to determine these things, and I really have no relationship to these companies. And so one question I have for y'all is, as a consumer, what's a good question to ask when you're in a local business, whether it's a cashier or the founder? Like, what can we ask to help determine, is this the kind of business I want to be investing in, my time and effort and money as a result of that?
That's a very good question. It's a very good question. I think if a company has not demonstrated this is a high bar, but there's no other way to get to it. You're gonna have to figure out where there's evidence of transparency. Like, is there any evidence of the who, of the where, of the how? And I think for a lot of companies, when you can't see any of that, when no one can answer any of that, you don't need to ask any other questions. Like, there's nothing. Then it's just like a matter of like, in this moment, is this the moment where I choose to participate and spend money here? Is this the moment I choose to resist? And I think that's it. I think that idea of like, does anyone know anything? And if nobody knows anything, then that tells you all you need to know. Because not knowing is evidence that someone doesn't want you to know. If no one knows, there's a reason why no one knows, and that's because the people who do know hope no one ever finds out. So I think that transparency is huge, right? You can still on a website, do they have evidence of an impact report? Do they have an about us? Do they have about like a story of where our products are made? Are they B Corp status certified? Like, these are the things that are markers of some effort at trying to be transparent about their processes and their procedures, their policies, their culture, that we should be checking for.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also like that you asked, who you're going to ask this question to, right? The cashier or the founder? Well, I think staff can tell you a lot. And, I think that there's certain things we shouldn't put on people who are probably making minimum wage, but there's things that you can, and that maybe they'll be a little weird about it because it might be a weird question, but maybe they'll appreciate it. And that's asking them how they like their job. You're going to get, even if they say, it's fine, you're going to probably, if you're okay at reading people, you're going to understand. And if it seems like it's somebody that really doesn't like their job, sure, maybe they're having a bad day, but maybe that's a business you look into a little bit more, because maybe they're not a great place to work. And if they're not treating their employees well, I can guarantee you they do not care about their supply chain, their community, because your employees are important. They are your business. And maybe, maybe they're there for 6 months, maybe they're there for 10 years, but if somebody doesn't like working somewhere, they're probably not being treated well. So you're giving your money to their boss who's not treating them well. So that would be a question that I would maybe ask of a cashier somewhere.
I would also check labels. If like the standard for how workers are treated, particularly if it's garments, if it's, and it doesn't really truly doesn't matter what the thing is. The way that what globalization what is allowed for is for there to be this veiling about, and this absence of oversight about what happens in other countries, and it creates this sense of like, not on me, not my liability, whatever happens there is on them. Check labels, there's not one country where it's like this is the country where it's absolutely awful. Certain countries, we can look at the Uyghurs of China, they are essentially they're in slave labor camps, right? So there are certain countries that have cultural and political comfort with completely abusing their workers. Like, they don't value human life, so they don't value labor. So check the labels, see what that can tell you. And where you can, in the very least, we know that things that are made in America have a different level of oversight in terms of how, the labor is being, the demands on employers in their relationships with their employees. So I would definitely, where you can, that may be one other thing you might want to consider. If something's made in America, it definitely might suggest that there's a lower carbon footprint. It might suggest that the workers are paid more. So check labels.
I was going to say, a lot of this conversation too has been about local, right? The small businesses, the local, getting to know your farmers and the people who are distributing your products. So oftentimes there's more transparency and also a better ability to talk to those owners or founders or people in that small company with a local business. And it's like we brought up the Jeff Bezos example, maybe it costs you $50 on Amazon, but maybe is it only a few more dollars to support someone who's locally, in your neighborhood or in your city, that you can walk and talk to them, because do you feel better about that purchase, or do you want to get this tomorrow by 2 p.m. and know you're doing a ton of carbon emissions in the meantime, right? So,
and the other thing about shopping local is that, we don't think about this. We all know this. We don't think about it. And I've certainly purchased something from Amazon, so I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is, when you shop local versus Amazon in particular as like one call out, they don't pay taxes. So when you shop in a local business, you are also affirming what will be a tax base that will fund things like our streets and potholes and trash pickup and schools. So there's another benefit to keeping our dollars in our city, is that it has this other immediate impact that benefits us directly. right? So when we're working with these larger, shopping from these larger companies, sometimes that's a loss. So that's another benefit of just trying to be intentional. First right of refusal, planning ahead to that. You know, oftentimes I think about like, what do we need? What do we buy that we need? It's like food, gas. A lot of the things that we buy, we don't need them. So it's just the things to think about, right? It's like, how can we just do a little bit better, a little bit more quickly?
There's a stat that I think it's twice as much of your dollars will stay in the local community when you spend on a local business versus a large big box store, Amazon, or whatever else that may be too.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from this lovely
Illustrious audience.
I have something that I think it's a question, but it might be more of just like maybe it's too existential, I'm not sure. But
Try us.
But I think we have a wide variety of, age here. And I'm 24, and I've noticed this, especially just in my lifetime and during the pandemic, like so much more. But I feel like with a lot of movements, there are, labels and there are names like harm reduction. That's a good way to frame a lot of stuff. But I think the isolation that is encouraged by not knowing your community, not, shopping from cheap big box shops and stuff, and just not knowing your neighbors. And social media is a big part of that. But if there was a term for that, I think that would be helpful, and maybe there is, and I just don't know.
A term for
like the insulation of being separate from all of these things?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the individualism of like how our society has gotten to. It goes back to that community aspect where you didn't have a choice not to know who was around you. Now you could be in an apartment development and not know the people on your floor, let alone the rest of the building.
Right.
So it's kind of like capitalism has led to that individual, survival of the fittest. So I'm going to focus on myself, get to my level, whatever outside of my family, I'm not necessarily focused on. So I feel like I understand what I think you're trying to say is like, how do you frame that into like a congestible term that says, hey, when you're not focused on the community, you're going on this individualistic side, especially when you're consuming, that you're doing all these things, you're not contributing to the tax base, you're not doing these different kind of things. So I feel like I don't think there's a word for that.
I mean, you said like individualism, that just left me for a moment. So that is the word, but I feel like, I don't know, it's I feel like there could be something broader that would just be
because
more.
that's what capitalism has done, right? Is it's broken us down into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller groups until we're individuals because we'll purchase more that way. How many generations used to live in a house together? And they only needed one house. They only needed one car. And now we all need our own apartment. We need our own vehicle, and we need our own this. And it's the breakdown of not just the, some people might want to say the morality is broken down when you break up families and things like that, but you're selling more, and capitalism does better. And I'm not anti-capitalist completely. Like, we live in this world. Kimberly and I were just talking about how we're not going back to living in groups of 150 people, right? It would be great, but it's not going to happen. There's too many of us.
Group people are doing it, but
right. Well, we have to figure it out in this way, and that's a really good question. And I don't think there is a word or a phrase for that, just other than the individualism of
We found American
Oh.
culture.
Give it to us.
what is it?
Atomization.
Atomization.
Atomization?
We're like-
Breaking down
Oh, yeah.
Part of the molecule, part of the whole.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good one. That is, yeah.
Societal, yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, right?
And it makes sense too, to the extent of how atoms behave.
Yep, exactly.
I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I think I did pass this. I
She
think
plays
I got,
on TV.
I think I got this far. That atoms are actually, you got it. They're really, they crash, right? They're actually in violent interactions all the time. There's like friction, and there's like this fast-paced, violent action. So that atomization would be another one of those things that we're experiencing, where we're crashing into each other, and in these smaller parts, not recognizing that we actually are a whole, right? Like, we are actually all
part
a whole.
of the same thing.
Right, and that cognitive dissonance that says that you are yourself and you're not related or responsible for anyone else is ultimately what will cannibalize. You will cannibalize yourself that way, right? That, because that's so unsustainable. That that insulation will actually lead to your own destruction. And that idea that we've been conditioned to not see anything, not ourselves, not systems, not society, not the government, not the economy. It's another reason why we're crashing towards all of this. There's all this friction in our daily lives that disrupts the balance and the peace. And so I hear what you're saying, and I feel what you're saying, the nihilism that might produce. But I wanna offer a different kind of philosophical view, which is that to accept that and all of its horror might be to surrender to pessimism. And I want to remind you that pessimism is a force of oppressive energies, right? Oppressive energies, institutions, economies, relationships, they want you to be defeated. They want you to feel defeated. And so sometimes the most radical act that we can pursue of resistance is simply defending our optimism. Like holding the front line that we will not allow our optimism to be absolutely, I don't even know, like not even beyond consumed.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like that it won't, that it won't be
down.
consumed, right? We have to say like, you can challenge so many things about my perception and my experience, but you cannot, I will not allow you to completely consume all of my optimism. Because when we get to that place, then that's when life loses its joy, and that's when suicidal, homicidal ideation sets in, and hopelessness becomes like the major epidemic, which I think it is. And so I think that that's the thing that for people who have the capacity, the bandwidth, to recognize that optimism is a force that we have to fight for, it is a part of our well-being, holding on to that. So I think we can see all of that and still hold on to our optimism.
Along those lines, when we refer to optimism and isolation, I have come to the decision, well, I'm going to try to stick to it.
Mm-hmm.
I find Instagram has literally made me depressed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to say that.
I
but-
appreciate that vulnerability.
I mean, right, it has just brought me right down. I'm starting a new business, so Instagram is this ugly evil. And can we combat it?
We do it this
Can
way.
we? I mean, the community,
We do it in
which is
person.
one of the reasons I'm loving the community aspect that you're referring to. It's one of the reasons I'm here this evening is the whole networking process, actually talking and communicating and sharing. And so yeah, last night I attempted to do a little video saying I'm going to snail Instagram because I am finding it literally disturbing to my mental being.
How many of you guys have had that experience where you realize at some point that it was producing something that was not helpful?
Right. It
right?
is, yeah.
I think that is the dominant
And it's,
experience.
yeah, it's clearly shared.
in this room. It is
It's
a majority.
shared, and yet we're still consumed by it.
So I would
I
like
just-
to
yeah.
just offer,
I would
I hear
love
a lot
anything
of
you can
people
offer.
talk about often how depressed it makes them and it gives them
Right.
anxiety. And I haven't had this problem. And I've been
Good for
on
you.
it and I'm on it every day. And I've realized that it's because I've compartmentalized it and I curate it very, very much. If there are people on there who I realize that this is a person whose behavior I don't like, if it's not adding anything to me, I take them away. Doesn't hurt them, but it helps me. So I take them away. I do it because I post every day for my business, and it is important for my business. So I set aside a half an hour every day that it is for that. And then I don't go on it again. And I think, and that might not work for everybody, but I think treating it as a task, taking out the garbage, right? It's a task. Nobody wants to do it. No one's like, yay, I'm taking out the garbage. But you can make it better than maybe what it is. And I think that's another thing with Instagram is really, and this sounds a little corny and it's a little cliche, but treating it as something that you enjoy, like what would make you enjoy it? Is there
I
a
can't
certain
get there. I can't get there. I
There's
can't
a
get
creative
there.
aspect to it.
Right, and that's what I like about
And
it.
that's what she's saying. Like you have to
Right.
find what it is. If you are a business owner, or if you have surrendered that you will be a personal piece of real estate, which is what most of us are on real estate on Instagram, right? We are commodifying ourselves, and
Yes.
whatever we're being played. You have to figure out what would allow you to do it, right? And for some of us, we will decide that we can find it, and some of us we will never decide what we get out of it.
Right.
It'll just be like I gotta be here, so I gotta be here, and I'm gonna leave, and I'm not gonna. I will participate as a creator, but I will not participate as a voyeur. I will not participate as a consumer. And those are boundaries. That's like any other healthy relationship. You'll have to decide. We all have to decide what are healthy boundaries for us.
And eliminating screen time is also a good, they have the limits on the apps you can do. So if you find yourself on there, it's like, should you really be on here still? So that's also helpful as a...
Blockers saved me of just being able to do, like Melissa said, like, I have my blocker on from 9 to 5. So if I'm going to do something, I have to get it in before 9 or I have to wait until after the day. And it actually like doesn't even let me click onto it. So that helped me.
I have it in a folder.
Yeah. I have it in a folder.
I literally have a folder that says stop scrolling. And so I have to go into that and I have to recognize this is what I'm about to do. But then I also allow myself, if I want to just be mindless and scroll for 10 minutes, okay, I'm going to do that. But I make a decision before I start. I'm going to just go mess around for 10 minutes. And then I stop. And it's like I could eat cookies and ice cream every day. I was just talking to Allison about I have a sugar issue, but I have to put boundaries on it. And I think that that's something that we all need to learn about social media because it's new, right? So we have to figure out, and those boundaries are going to be different for everybody. And you know, I'm sure if we all looked at each other's feeds on Instagram, they would be vastly different. So like, what are you being able to kind of curate what does make you happy? My feed is mostly dog videos. So I don't get upset. It's like my friends' businesses and dog videos. So it's a really joyful place for me to go onto Instagram and get to see what my friends are doing and I get to see some fun dogs. It's great. But every once in a while I will go down these rabbit holes and I'm like, this is an awful place. Who are these people? These realities they're not real. This is not how people live. This is not how people talk. And I can see how it can be very depressing and very stressful. I also think thinking that it's supposed to be a certain way, like if you are going to have one for your business.
It's the only reason I have it.
So I think that you shouldn't think, you know, it needs to be a certain way, right? Like, do you dress a certain way because other people do? Then your Instagram should be how you want it and not how somebody else's is. You know, so if somebody says this works, that works.
Yeah.
And we just have to train ourselves. It's like going to the gym, right? Like your brain is a muscle and you have to train it and you have to give it boundaries and you have to work hard to stay within those boundaries. Or I think there's plenty of people who can have successful businesses without it, but you have to figure out the other avenues. And that you can do it. There are plenty of people who don't have an Instagram, but you have to put that effort somewhere else.
So in the interest of time, I wanted to ask a question to you all because we were talking about businesses. Can you just give the audience like some of your favorite local businesses that you support in your day-to-day life that maybe they know about and maybe they don't?
That's a sweet question.
It's a very good question.
I love artisanal things. I love the things that people literally pour themselves into. I think there's something really tender about that. A Golden Water Co. You know, they're a soap company. I love Chartel. I love her products. Like, it's like I love her products. Other businesses that are local and loved on. Lizzie's Love Cakes. We love Lizzie's Love Cakes. Locale artisan, they do the French toast bites. They would love you. This is a lot of food.
These are all
a lot of women.
I was about to say mostly all I buy is food.
Yeah.
I don't buy a lot of things.
Yeah.
So most of my money goes to food and that's what
So those are some of them. Remark Glass would be remiss and I'm in Triple Bottom Brewing. Tess Hart she's a phenomenal leader. Who else is on the list?
Who else?
Honeysuckle Provision, which is in West Philly. I mean, Chef Omar Tate he was Esquire Chef of the Year in 2020. He makes the most buttery, delicious pastries, among other things. And they make everything at this restaurant, from the breads to the lunch meats that they cut themselves. They do everything. So I would definitely say check out Honeysuckle Provision.
River Wards, which is a really great
Yep.
grocery store. They have 2 locations, Fishtown and Old City.
Down North Pizza is doing some great work and trying to figure out how to build long-term community with people who have had an experience of incarceration. We're very values aligned with them in that way. So I would definitely recommend Down North Pizza. The Philadelphia restaurant scene writ large
There's
is
so
really great.
many. There's so many great restaurant owners and chefs and staff in this city. It's really one of the best things that Philadelphia has to offer. If you are somebody who likes to eat out, and I mean everything from We were just talking about one of my favorite Greek restaurants on South Street Slovaki. They have been there for, the 70s maybe, a long time.
And they did something amazing. They gave it back to the workers.
Yes, the owner retired recently and he sold
Yeah, I
it
didn't hear that. That's
very,
wonderful.
very
Right.
inexpensively to the
Wonderful.
two guys who have been working in the
Right.
kitchen
That's
forever. So
Right.
they're a really great place to, and they're, quick Greek food. You could grab a couple of kebabs from their window. And then there's also, a lot of high-end restaurants who, trying to think, like even this neighborhood, I don't even go out to eat anymore. I go to the farmer's market and cook food at home, but Philly does have a great restaurant scene.
I think in general, as we're talking about all these things, right, just keep on going back to the local businesses, and on the flip side of the isolation, individualism, the word that you mentioned, atomization?
Atomization.
Atomization, adding vocabulary to our skills tonight too. I think such a powerful thing, as I was just thinking as we were talking about, like, what makes you feel good or bad with Instagram and all this other stuff. Like, I feel so good just spending money at a farmer's market, and I know I spend way more than if I went to like a grocery store with a list and a budget, but I'm like, I talk to all these people who are making these really cool products. I can find gifts for people. Like, I don't give people like stuff on their list. I find like food or drink that will make them happy, or local soap or things that are made from local makers that I like, right? So I think just really going back to going into your own community, who are the people, getting to know your neighbors, volunteering. This all sounds very corny, but like I started planting trees in my neighborhood in Fishtown-ish with Philly tree people, and it's great because twice a year they have the tree planting crew, then they have like the lunch, and it's sponsored by Philly Brewing, all these local businesses. Then I continue to support them because it's people that I know, I hear their stories, and the more you get out in your own community, the more you can support and be a conscious consumer overall, which is going back to this ultimate thing. So I just want to say, I want to give you all a chance to talk to the speakers and these lovely experts more, talk to each other, network, connect, all these great things. So please give
Shop, you're here.
Shop, please.
You're here.
Yeah, obviously, if you need some stuff, or even if you don't, just like it, just get it, it's fine. Talking about conscious capitalism, consumerism, right? Well, first and foremost, can we give a round of applause to Melissa and Kimberly? Yeah, and thank you both for your time, for sharing your stories. They have so many more great stories and expertise to share. And yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to let us know. Just a quick logistical thing, we will send a survey, so tell us what you thought of tonight's events. And if you have other ideas of stuff you want to learn, let me know too, because that's what we're doing. Melvin is planning an awesome events calendar this year, so we'll have a lot of cool topics and stories too. But thank you all.
Perfect
Enjoy.
time.
There's food, drink. Enjoy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I didn't shut my alarm off even though I extended my meter.
That's awesome.